Sometimes you just want to read a big book. We're talking like 1,000-page Doorstoppers, like something you could legitimately register as a lethal weapon if you had to. Something you'll like allot yourself 2 weeks to read and still miss the mark. That kind of a book. And there's actually no better time to talk about this than right now, because I'm deathly ill and I've been literally laying in bed for like the past 3 days reading House of Chains, which would qualify for this list, you know? So if I sound a little bit rough, that's because I've been deathly ill for a few days now, but I am coming out the other side. Anyway, we're talking about Doorstoppers today, and I said 1,000-page book, but I pretty much kind of expanded that by like 100 pages on either side. So I pretty much, if it hit 900 pages, I considered it good enough, and 1,100, like 900 to 1,100. Actually, it could go all the way up to infinity at this point if you wanted it to, but the bottom end of it's 900 pages. Oh, so there's not really 10, and these are in no particular order. This is just kind of like me recommending these massive books, because every single one of these is either a 10 out of 10 or it's damn close. I recommend every single one of these to like the utmost extent that I possibly could. We are going to start this list off with a cheat because it doesn't actually qualify for this list because it's not actually 900 pages and it is The Dark Tower. This, I just wanted to cheat. I wanted to get it on here because I don't talk about The Dark Tower enough. I have talked about its adaptation and stuff like that, but the book itself, the series itself, this is my favorite series of all time. And I think this is like 860 pages or something like that. Actually, this one's only 842, but I'm sure the paperback comes in higher. But anyway, that's not the point. The Dark Tower is just my favorite series, like, of all time. It is Stephen King's big magnum opus. It is a 7-book series. The series that starts with the infamous line of the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. And from there, it is a 7-book series about the Roland's journey to the Dark Tower, and the Dark Tower is the central linchpin of power that holds the entire Stephen King multiverse together. And then he will go on this epic journey that will meld fantasy, science fiction, horror, every genre Stephen King has ever written into one cohesive thing. Cohesive, we use that word lightly here, and he will travel in and out of universes, in and out of worlds. He will travel from literal worlds we will recognize from other Stephen King books to wholly new ones as he goes on this journey to the Dark Tower. It is just the greatest, maybe not the greatest series ever written, but it is easily my favorite. And it's just, and this is such a good book. It is such a good ending to such a good series. I can't recommend it enough. If you have not read The Dark Tower, please do yourself a favor and read it. If you're not quite sold on the gunslinger, which I hate to say this, try to move on to the second book and try to give the second one a try, because a lot of people bounce off of the gunslinger, and I don't understand why, because it's kind of my favorite book in the entire series. Like, I could not get enough of that book as I was reading it. So when people are like, I just don't get the gunslinger, I'm like, I don't get you. Anyway, go read The Dark Tower. It's fabulous. Also, I cheated. Anyway, now moving on to the next book, and this one, I really kind of want to get this one right up top on the list because I don't think many people know what this is, and it is Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa. Oh man, I'm good. I don't know how I knew that. Eiji, if I'm saying that even close to right. Musashi is the story of Miyamoto Musashi, and it was written in 1939. And it is just this vast epic. It is this like 1,100-page tome. It is like the story of Musashi, who is one of the greatest swordsmen of all time. And it is the true story of an actual human being. He was an actual samurai. He was an actual swordsman. I want to say he went into something like 60-some personal one-on-one duels, won every single one of them. And then he retired and he wrote his book on philosophy and the way of the sword, his way of the sword, called The Book of Five Rings. And this book is still studied to this day. This is loosely about him because the author took what they did know about him, which was actually very little, and then kind of expanded on that into this epic story of a man and his struggles to become the greatest swordsman ever. So it's kind of, it's kind of like if it were a movie, it would say based on true events or something like that. But it is just such a wonderful read. Reading through, and by the time you get about the last 100 pages of this, I was so locked in, I could not stop. It is one of the greatest reading experiences of recent memory. Was the last like 100 pages of this, and then him and going off and going to this island. And oh my gosh, if you've read Vagabond, and you know what I mean by going to the island. So it's just, oh, also Vagabond, the manga Vagabond is literally based off of this book. It's just, I mean, all of it's so good. And anyway, classic Japanese novel of swordsman, a man struggling through trying to fight as many people as he can, trying to be the best at something. At the same time, being the best of a swordsman, swordsmen were kind of a dying breed at the time. Guns are coming in, military's taking over, the samurai are in decline, so he's really kind of like the last of a dying, so it's also kind of like the last gasp of a dying breed of people. It's just, man, it's so good. Next up, we're going to go with Memories of Ice by Steven Erikson. This is book 3 in the Malazan, or the Malazan, depending on how you want to say it, which I think it's actually Malazan. But, you know, Steve, I'm sure he doesn't die a little inside every time one of us says it wrong. Anyway, this is the best book in the Malazan series that I have read so far. I'm only on House of Chains, which is the one right after this, but boy, and I'm only about halfway through that book, but let me tell you right now, this one's better. This was just, oh god, oh, every page of it, I mean, start to finish, I gave this a perfect 10, and I stand by every second of that rating. It was, I mean, it's just, wow, it's good. Malazan is a 10-book series about the Malazan Empire, and I think I'm going to say this. The Malazan Empire is an empire who has had their emperor recently overthrown, and a new empress has taken the throne. They also are an expanding empire, and we are expanding on multiple different continents, and we are now going to follow people in multiple different groups of multiple different races. There are gods involved in the fighting. There is high-powered sorcerers. There is every possible fantasy-like thing you could imagine is going on at the same time. Then, instead of having like the epic good versus evil battle, which you kind of are used to in a fantasy setting, this is more of a, here's the battle, here are all these people on all these different sides, the Malazans and the Banyan Domin and all, I don't even know, the Daru and all kinds of different people, and all kinds of different, on all different kinds of sides of this battle. And then we're just going to follow random people on all of the sides. And he's going to be like, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? Oh, good luck figuring it out. So you're never really sure who we're following or why. You'll have this guy over here and you're like, well, he seems like a pretty cool dude. I like him. Then you find out bits of his backstory and you're like, maybe not. I don't know about that guy anymore. Yeah, but that's the whole thing. You are being constantly tested. Your morals, your moral standing, how you feel about a person, how you feel about a situation, how you feel about the battle at large. And he's not going to tell you which side you're supposed to be on. He just kind of shows it to you and walks away. He just kind of drops it in your lap and leaves. And you're just stuck holding this mess, the mess that is Malazan. Anyway, but it's some of the greatest. Man, some of the greatest just storytelling that I've read. Holy crap. I mean, it's good. Very good. Next up, another Stephen King. This is the official one for the list, and it's Under the Dome. Actually, I originally had The Stand written down because I was going to recommend it, but everybody knows about The Stand. It's considered a masterpiece by like everybody on the face of the planet. That and it could have been on this list. Actually, you could have really padded out this list with Stephen King books. Boy, he likes to write some long ones, but that's not the point. And a lot of his long books are really good. Anyway, then I wanted Under the Dome on here because I fucking adore this book. This book is so good. Now, I will say, this is kind of like, People like to clown on Stephen King for having bad endings to his books, and I tend to push back on that. Like, I think it's overblown. I think people say it a little bit too much. I think his endings are a lot better than people give him credit for. He's got a few stinkers, and then people just really kind of expand it to the point of insanity. This one legitimately has a bad ending, like really not good ending. So now you're going to be like, well, why is it on this list? Because the book is that good. Like, this book kind of is the reason why anytime somebody says the point is in the journey, not the ending, or whatever that saying is, this is the proof to that statement. This book is so legitimately good. It is a story of a small town, and it's called Under the Dome because a dome suddenly appears over this town, and nobody can get in, nobody can get out, and not even communications can get through this dome. They are literally isolated under this dome, and the tension and the chaos and the turmoil that ensues by cutting this town off from the rest of the world while trapping it with itself. It also highlights one of Stephen King's biggest strengths, which is the scariest thing in his stories doesn't tend to be the big bad. It tends to be the people that are being attacked by the big bad. Like, the mist comes down and they're being attacked by these mutants from outside of the supermarket, but you're more scared of the people inside the supermarket than you are these giant mutant monsters outside. So this kind of takes that theory and it just removes the bad guys entirely, because now there's not even a big bad. There's just a dome. The dome is the big bad, and the you're scared of is all of the fucked up shit these people are doing in their fear and their desperation and the way they act and overreact. And it's 1,000 pages of tense, like, just paranoia and fear and abuse, and the things these people do to each other when their fear and their paranoia gets the better of them is atrocious. Then you get to the ending and it's kind of dog shit, and you're just kind of like, but you've been so invested in this story for 1,000 pages, you just kind of don't care, because the reading experience of it was so good. I don't care that the ending's terrible. So if you are going to read this, I highly recommend it. I cannot tell you how great I genuinely think this book is, but if you don't like the ending, don't say I didn't warn you. Next up, Speaking Bones by Ken Liu. Now, I have not shut up about this series for about the past year since, well, has it been a year? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I haven't shut up about this since I read it. I adore Ken Liu. I adore the Dandelion Dynasty. It is the story of a dynasty, and it is the story of this kind of like an emperor. There's like an emperor in this fictionalized version of China, and nobody likes him. He's kind of really big, terrible, kind of oppressive emperor, and these two friends kind of team up to take him down and kind of bring down the old empire. And then we set in a new emperor, and then we follow that emperor and his children through the future. So it's kind of like this epic story. It's a 4-book series of the taking down of an old emperor and the placing of a new emperor. Then that emperor passes it off to his children, and there is another entire continent that tries to invade. It literally spans decades, and it is so big in scope. It is so epic. The first book kind of feels almost like a history book, and it's a little bit less exciting, and it's a little bit less character driven, and there's a little bit, once you get to the second book, which is The Wall of Storms, it does have a pretty massive shift in the way that he's telling the story, and it feels a little less dry. But I thought the first one, I was hooked on the first one. I know a lot of people say that they had really hard time getting into the first one, and if you can get to the second one, like I said with The Dark Tower, but I don't feel that way about this one. I guess I didn't feel that way about The Dark Tower either. I was hooked by both of them right away. I don't know. This one's a harder sell, though, because these books are a lot bigger. Like, it's like you read a 600, 700, 800 page book, and I'm just like, no. It's the next 900 pages that are going to get you. That's a hard sell. Anyway, so good. So good. So wonderful. I think it's one of the greatest series I've ever read. It will definitely be on my top 10 series of all time whenever I get around to remaking that list, which should be in the next couple of months. Technically, that's when I was supposed to do it, but I don't know if I want to hold off because, man, because I know Malazan's going to be on there. I don't know. Oh, that's a problem I'll worry about later. Next up is going to be 1Q84. I know I spring this one up a lot as well, but if we're going to talk about Doorstoppers that I think are must read, like you have to go out and get it, and if you haven't experienced it, your life is literally missing something, it's 1Q84. I love Haruki Murakami, and this is a story of two different people and parallel worlds. The very first chapter is this lady who gets stuck in a traffic jam on a bridge, and then she gets out of this car, goes and walks off of the bridge, and maybe just walks off the bridge and into a whole parallel universe. And then from there, we follow her and another man and their stories. We just, every other chapter alternate between her and him, and we follow their stories which seemingly have absolutely nothing to do with each other, which will at some point converge and intersect towards the end of the book. And it's if you've never read a Haruki Murakami book, he writes in the realm of magical realism, and it's just his stories are so normal and they're so mundane, and they're just so well written, they're so well told, there's so much charm and humor and life to these characters while they're seemingly doing nothing. So if you get into the book and you're like, man, there's not a lot going on here, once again, don't say I didn't warn you. And if you're not into his style of writing and his magical realism and all of just the strange things that happen in his book without any real explanation as to what's going on or how it works or anything like that. And once again, absolutely mundane. Very, very low action in this. And this is a big book. You're going to live in these people's minds and their lives for a long time. So this might not be the best starting point for a Haruki Murakami experience. There's much shorter books that'll give you kind of the same vibe from him that this one will, and then maybe move on into this one, even though this was actually my first Haruki Murakami read ever. I went straight head first into this, and I loved every second of it. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's probably still my favorite Haruki Murakami book to this day. So I don't know. Maybe do start with this one if you're weird and you like diving into the deep end like I do. But I think just so good. He's so good. Just everything about him's good. I know that he's become kind of controversial lately. I don't care. I still like him and I still like his style. It's kind of like a warm blanket just slipping back in. I read The City and Its Uncertain Walls this last couple months ago, and it was so nice to get a new Haruki Murakami book. It was just like slipping in. It was, I don't know, whatever. Next up is Storm of Swords by I'd almost say Stephen King, George R.R. Martin, and this is my favorite book in A Song of Ice and Fire. I have a hard time saying A Song of Ice and Fire. I don't know why. Anyway, this is my favorite book in that series. By far the best. That is definitely not a controversial opinion. That is pretty much what everybody says for the most part. More people say that than not. Okay, we'll put it that way. But boy, if you don't know the story of the Game of Thrones, I don't know if I could help you here, but I'm going to try. And it is the story of Westeros. And Westeros has these ruling families that all have like their own little land, but they are then ultimately ruled by the one that sits on the Iron Throne. And it is hotly contested. Holy crap. And this is the battle of that. But then at the same time, there is this other bigger, badder evil that's coming down from north of the wall. And we don't really know. The others are up there and they are coming. And winter is coming. But will we be ready when winter gets here? Because we're too busy fighting over this throne and who's going to sit on it. And the political drama. The political drama in this is probably peak political drama. If that is your thing, if you like that kind of stuff, this is going to be your jam. This is also a little bit slower, a little bit like the magic is dialed down to like 0. I'm not as close to 0 as you're going to get magic in a fantasy series, at least in my limited experience in fantasy. I'm not the most well-read fantasy reader, but this feels pretty dialed down to like 0.5. Anyway, so very low magic, very high political drama, very well written. His ability to master the language and what he's doing with language and how he writes, it's just super well written. That being said, kind of starts to feel a little slow and a little sloggy at times, especially once you get into books 4 and 5. So just keep that in mind. But this is book 3, and let me tell you, this one blazed a trail from page 1 to page 1000 or whatever it was. Wow, was this one on fire. This one was good. The whole series is good. I recommend you read the whole series, as a matter of fact. But this is just epic, top tier. Doesn't get any better as far as A Song of Ice and Fire is concerned. And last but not least, it is here. I know there's at least a small group of you that's like, where the f*** is Shogun? The last one's Shogun. And it is, I think everybody read this year, right? We saw that trailer for the FX show that's coming out for Shogun. Everybody went out and got a copy of this one. At least a lot of the booktubers that I watch went running out and grabbed a copy of it and read it, like hurried up and read it for that show or after the show, around the time the show that came out. And I'm guilty. I did say in my review of this, I think I gave it like an 8 out of 10 or something like that. And I said there's like an 800-page version of this that's like a 10 out of 10 because I thought it was too long. But it's wonderful. It really is. I am definitely in the minority when I felt like this could have been edited down a bit. Most people loved it. Most people are like, no, give me the full 1,000 pages of that. And they just loved living in this world, which, by the way, this world is truly wonderful. It is the story of an English ship that crash lands on Japan in the time of, kind of like right around the time of that Miyamoto Musashi. England has never been to Japan before at this point. The only European country that has landed in Japan is Portugal. And the Portugal have set up communications and trade with Japan. They've even got some little communities there. Then he is an Englishman in Japan, so he's nobody to these Japanese people. He's really on dangerous ground. Then he is an English Protestant, and the Portuguese are Catholic. And in Europe right now, they're pretty much almost at war, basically. So he is in a foreign country which is not friendly to him, which is now friends with the Portuguese, which are not friendly to him. He's really in a bad situation. And it's just, how does he live? How does he survive? How does he navigate this political situation that he finds himself in this period in time? And it is so good, so well written. If it sounds intriguing, it's because it is. And the show is so well done too. If you haven't seen that, go watch that too, because that won more Emmys than any other show in the history of the Emmys has ever won, and there is a damn good reason for it. It was so good. Anyway, but yeah, this was just such a good book. Really, really good. Like I said, I personally felt like it lasted a little long, and I thought it could have been trimmed a little bit. But like I said, if you are into what he's doing and you're really into these big doorstopper books, like I'm definitely in the minority. Most people that I know of that I have spoken to or even watched their videos, they normally just eat it up, and they're all in on the 1,000 pages of this. So and even me being like, oh, it might have been a little bit long, I don't care. I still recommend it to pretty much anybody I can recommend it to, because it really was a genuinely fabulous book. Anyway, do you have any huge doorstopper 1,000-page books that you recommend? Please drop them in the comments below. And of course, as always, the link for my Patreon is in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.